Okay, this is my interview with Fred Corbin.
Am I still in the frame? Kind of set up on the front.
No, you're not now. There we go. Now you are.
Cool.
That's a little... Okay, my interview with Fred Corbin. First of all, thanks for doing this.
You're very welcome.
As being a friend and one of the people I really looked up to in tattooing, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do it.
Anything for you, Scott.
First of all, how old are you?
I am 43.
And when did you first get exposed to tattooing? What was your first experience with it?
You know, I was exposed to it when I was, a young teenager, but it was mostly through cholos at my school or, the old plumber guy that had World War II tattoos that came and fixed the house or worked on the house or the refrigerator or something. There wasn't really a lot of tattooing going on where I lived. So that was my first exposure to it.
Where did you grow up at?
I grew up most of my childhood in Sacramento.
Okay.
The bulk of it. Moved to San Francisco when I was 18.
Okay.
My first profound tattoo experience, when I was actually blown away by tattoos, was in San Francisco. I think the first thing that really sent me over the edge was walking. I knew that I wanted to get tattooed before I moved to San Francisco when I was 18, and I knew that I wanted to get tattooed, but I was kind of caught in that, your first tattoo. It's it's such a big decision because you haven't gotten tattooed yet, and, what do you get, and you got to have it forever, and, what's it going to be, and all this stuff. So I kind of just kept waiting, and I figured I'd wait till I get to San Francisco, and I saw that black tattoo time with that tribal and snake leg, the new tribalism.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, what the fuck? What the fuck is that?
Right.
And, and then I saw the Leo Zulueta punk rock tattoos, and I was totally attracted to those Leo tattoos, the Sacred Hearts with the tribal swastikas and the swords and stuff. So that stuff was the first stuff that really made me go, okay, get into gear and get to a shop kind of thing.
Okay.
And I remember I was so broke back then that I had to wait till I got a tax return of $75 to get tattooed, So I got my tax return and I, ran down to Lyle Tuttle's and got my first tattoo.
And who did your first tattoo?
Joshua Golden.
Joshua Golden.
He used to work at Lyle's.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did it go from getting a tattoo to tattooing?
Well, one part that I left out is I actually tattooed myself first. The first tattoo I ever got, actually, I did myself. So I kind of, I'll backtrack a quick second. My girlfriend had done a hand poke tattoo on herself of an Egyptian eye, which I just thought was the fucking coolest thing in the world,
Right. As hell.
So that was really actually, that and the tattoo time were the two catalysts. Is he cool?
Yeah, it's fine,
okay.
dude.
Are the two catalysts that made me really wow, okay, I'm ready to do this. So I tried tattooing myself because it was black. I kind of copped one of the Leo designs and tattooed my ankle, and it took so bloody long that I was just this is bullshit. I knew getting to a shop was the thing to do. It was more of a money thing. And what was weird about it too was that I wanted to tattoo as I was getting tattooed. I knew that I wanted to tattoo even before I started tattooing. It was just because I was doing a lot of artwork with just black pens and black ink.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know anybody in San Francisco. So I would go to coffee shops after work and just, get some flyers, turn them over, and just draw and sit around and drink coffee and stuff. You're so talkative right now. It's
perfect timing, dude.
Yeah, exactly, of course, right?
Perfect timing. Way to go, buddy. Your big debut.
And what do you think? So, we were thinking it's kind of funny because somebody asked me what he thinks of my tattoos, and I don't think he even realizes that we're tattooed.
No.
I think because he sees you and me and all my friends at work, and just it'd be the person that doesn't have the tattoos. Grandma is the unusual one.
Exactly. It's the albino alligator.
So, can I grab my tea real quick?
You can do whatever you want.
Okay. You got it?
No, it doesn't matter. I'll keep it in there.
Well, I think it's inside. So my girlfriend had done a hand poke tattoo. I hand poked myself. Did a little tattoo on myself. It took forever, so I just said, okay, I'm waiting until I get some dough, and I'm gonna go to Lyle Tuttle's. I had since bought a few tattoo time, And one thing that was really neat was, a third of the pictures that I was looking through were like, Greg Irons, San Francisco, Henry Goldfield, San Francisco,
Right.
Ed Hardy, San Francisco, and I was living in San Francisco. I was just like, where are these people?
Right. Right.
And, so I went to Lyle's because that was the place that I had always passed at the tattoo museum and stuff. It was pretty neat. The old shop was pretty cool. And I went in there and I got tattooed, and, I saw artists sitting around doing tattoos, listening to music, not wearing a suit, having a good time, and I just thought, man, this is for me.
Right.
I've found what I would want to do.
And so how did you start tattooing? Did you do an apprenticeship? Did you...
I always really wanted an apprenticeship. How I started tattooing was by going on a mission and getting tattooed by different tattooers until one would talk about getting the equipment. And that was basically the third person I got tattooed by, and that was Erno Zabadi. I got tattooed by Joshua Golden at Lyle's. I went back to Lyle's, got tattooed by Morbella, which was awesome.
Oh, amazing.
And then I was, kind of living right at the base of Golden Gate Park. So not really the Haight, but very close to the Haight. And I would take the bus up the Haight all the time. And Erno's had opened up. He had worked for Lyle for about 7 or 8 years, and Erno's opened up, and he had an Ed Hardy bodysuit. So back then, he had like these incredible tattoos. So
Right.
word on the street was that like he had amazing colors. He's got really nice colors. I mean, this guy's got colors, So
Right.
I went in there to see what was up, and he was super friendly, and. Greg Coles had just started working there, like, after I kind of had the green light to hang around, so it was like him and Greg Coles, and then Dan Higgs showed up. So it was like, and Sonny Tufts was hanging out, so it was, like, super cool.
Right. And what year do you think that is?
Well, that was 87.
87.
Yeah, that was 87. I hung around there beginning of 87. I started getting tattooed, I guess, into 86, so then I know that when basically Dan left is kind of when I got the okay to start tattooing, and that was in November of 87. He went back to Baltimore.
He went back to Baltimore.
Yeah.
Then he ends up coming back, right?
Yeah, he ended up coming back with
Right.
his wife and his kid.
Right. And so how long did you work at Erno's?
I worked at Eros for only about a couple years, about 2 years. It was I always planned on staying longer, but it was a bit too much of a party atmosphere. Erno was doing a lot of drugs. There was a lot of people hanging out, like doing speed, and smoking weed. And, it was kind of a novelty at first because it was like, it was just like so no rules that it was
Right.
kind of interesting or
Sure.
kind of a novelty at first,
Right.
But Greg and Dan and I really just wanted a tattoo, so it really ended up being a huge pain in the ass. There's all these stragglers taking up space just because they want to hang out with Erno and do some lines with him or whatever, So Ed offered me a job after I had gotten tattooed by him a couple times. And, it took me a little bit because there's like this weird little thing, like Ed Hardy calls and offers you a job and you immediately want to say yes, but I felt this huge loyalty to Erno for like breaking me into the business,
Right.
So, I thought about it for a day and I was just like, I gotta move,
Right.
I gotta move. So I ended up in 89 or the beginning of 90 working, jumping and working at Realistic with Bill Salmon at Realistic Tattoo for Ed Hardy.
And so Realistic was a private only.
I believe Realistic was the first. Realistic was the first, like, no sign out front,
Right.
got a call to come in, like, Japanese style tattoo
Right.
shop. He opened it in 74. He hired me in 90, and I was the 7th person that he had hired. So it was really neat. I always considered Realistic to really be like a temple of tattooing.
Right,
Because
for sure.
the energy, it was just a little office, that didn't have a lot of character, but the paintings that were in there and the soul and the vibe of the people that had been in there before, like Greg Irons and Leo and Dan Tomei. Bob Roberts
Right.
was the first person that he hired there. Jamie LaPalma, who had died by the time I got there. Greg had worked there a little bit, and so I worked with Bill. And then Bill quit working there, and then that's when we pulled Dan over from Erno's. Because Erno wasn't really, kind of keeping up with his word that he promised Dan he'd be the manager and do all this and that. And it wasn't happening, so we just yanked him over.
Right. The first time I ever went to Erno's was right when Dan was going over there. I think I was at Erno's, and I think I have a memory of Dan sitting at a drawing table drawing, and I swear he was drawing that devil thing, that sabotage thing. And I swear I watched him draw that thing, and because somebody I knew was getting tattooed by Greg Coles. And I remember being like, whoa, man, what the fuck? Because my experience of tattooing before that was like, I just started tattooing, and was like all these biker tattoos. It was like this,
And that was in Monterey?
Yeah, like tight threes, and
Totally.
seeing this thing, I was like, holy crap,
Well, when Dan first started tattooing, he was using tight threes and 7 max.
Right, he was like black and gray guy.
Yeah,
right?
kind of Greg Ironsy-ish.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And so that was my experience of Erno's, and it was like, dudes in leather and dreadlocks and the piercing shop and the bone shop, and it was like, holy cow, it was like a full renegade street.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like such a thing to me that I was like, it was so like, this is the life I want. This is it. This is the life I want.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean.
And then now you're in this atmosphere, which is not partying.
Yeah.
Lord knows that Ed is a very pretty,
Yeah.
all about the work.
I mean, it was pretty cool. I mean, Ed was tattooing out of a condo at that point. When he was living in Honolulu, and he would come into San Francisco, and he would basically live and stay in his apartment in the Tenderloin. He had a real nice apartment in the Tenderloin. So it was kind of cool. I mean, when you'd get tattooed by Ed, you'd have to... When I first started hearing and wanting to get tattooed by Ed, it was like you had to write him a letter, and it was $200 an hour.
Japanese stuff.
It was like, I didn't think I was ever even going to be able to get tattooed by Ed Hardy. It was just like something that was like intangible, you know. But, things just kind of worked out. I met him at an art show. I was getting tattooed by Henry. We went to dinner at Viva's. Ed was there. And I had just gotten a little boxer puppy, and Ed loves boxers. So he was like, I want to come see your boxer. And I was just like, oh my God, Ed Hardy wants to see my boxer. Because I was just like, idolized the guy,
Right.
So, and then I think I got a birthday present of like, instead of somebody buying me something, I managed to get like around Christmas and birthday, like accumulate like $300. And this is like, 89 or something like that. So I was like, hour and a half,
Right.
let's get this started, So I called him and went over and saw him, and I wanted to get, like a tattooed geisha, but basically like a tattooed nun, and I wanted religious tattoos, but I didn't want to push it, I didn't want to be like, this is what I want, and I want this, and I want that, I figured just a tattooed nun would be cool enough, and I figured she'd have like, Japanese tattoos or wind bars and dragons or something like that, and Ed loved the idea, and he was totally like, what if she had religious tattoos, and I was like,
Right.
well, that's what I want, I just, just trying to like go easy on you here, and,
Right.
and we just really clicked, and the second time he tattooed me, I didn't realize that he was kind of interviewing me until the next morning, but he was asking me lots of questions about, because he only had one person at Realistic,
Right.
Dan Tomei had worked there, but then he split. So he just had Bill there, so he was asking me like what kind of tattoos I did, and did I do a lot of tribal tattoos, because that stuff was very popular
Right.
back then, and
Sure.
Bill wasn't really doing it, so there was an outlet for that, and, he just asked me a lot of questions, and I was just tickled to death that he was even interested. And I think one of the clinchers was that we started talking about back pieces. And the ironic thing is I never would have brought up a tattoo that I want to get a couple years down the road. You know what I mean? But he was just like, oh, what kind of back piece do you want to get? We just were talking about it, shooting the shit as he was tattooing me, I said, well, actually, I want you to do my back, and he said, well, what do you want to get? And I said, well, I wasn't really going to ever bring it up until I was ready, but I want to get a Rock of Ages. And it was like, he set his machine down, and he was like, a Rock of Ages, that's like one of my favorite images. And, this is like preempting the Rock of Ages book. And,
Right, sure.
And, he's like, I'll do it as traditional or as esoteric as you want it. And he was just so excited. I was just so excited that he was so excited about it, And, I was like, well, this isn't anything I'm going to be able to do anytime soon, so
Right.
don't get too excited about it,
Right.
And,
Like it took me a couple months to get this $300 together.
Yeah, exactly. and Ed's just like as cool as anybody else. You know, when you get to know him, you know, it's not like this unfathomable thing that you can't get to. You just have to kind of be serious and ready and, you know, just know what you want. No bullshit, you know. So he basically called me the next morning and said, you know, hey, if you want to come work for me, I can give you this much. And I, you know, only charge people that work for me $100 an hour instead of $2, so we could start your back right away. Right. You know, and it was like, oh, bummer, you know. So he wasn't at, you know, this was a long point in making, but he didn't work at Realistic with me and Bill. So we were kind of there on our own, you know, but we just both were in a really good place, you know what I mean? Like neither of us were really into doing drugs or, you know, just partying for the sake of partying. We both smoked weed, and we'd sneak out to the parking lot midday or so sometimes and burn one or whatever, but we were just really wanting a tattoo, you know, so it just worked out great. You know, and then when Dan was there, it was just like even better because Dan and I were already friends, and we had a relationship from before. You know, I sat at Eros and I asked Dan how long he had been tattooing, and he said 2 years, and I was like, okay, in 2 years I'm gonna work at Eros. You know, and then I was working there like about 4 months later or something like that. You know, because Erno needed somebody. I missed the apprenticeship thing and the whole work of everything.
Trial by fire.
But whatever.
Yeah,
you know,
you were there.
Like, I had keys. You know, I was down. I'm going for it.
And then you Ed ends up opening Tattoo City.
Well, I mean, for the record, what really happened is that Eddie wanted to move to San Francisco, and the lease was coming up at at Realistic Studio. What you need, bud? So I didn't know what Ed was going to do. I mean, he had his condo thing going, and he was making a bunch of money, and, you know, I had no idea if he wanted to open up a shop or not. So Eddie and I decided that we were going to open up a shop together, but we were going to do it old school, and we were going to go to Ed and ask him first. So basically, we were going to open up a shop. We were going to call it Temple Tattoo. That's how the whole Temple Dudes thing started, because we couldn't really talk about it, but we were going to do a convention in New Orleans, you know, so we were just going to have a banner that said Temple Dudes. And we were going to hire Igor and Dan, and it was going to be the four of us. And we went to Ed and told him about it and said, this is what we want to do. And it's crazy because Ed just makes shit happen, as you know. So we literally talked about it on the Bay Bridge, I think, on the way home from the Garden Grove convention. And he literally drove from the bridge to Columbus, and the next morning had a spot. Was like measuring to make stations and shit. He calls me next morning, he's like, I got the spot, come check it out, you know. So then that was the birth of Tattoo City. Fortunately, thank God, we realized it was 13 years after the original Tattoo City had burned. Oh. So we were like, let's call it Tattoo City, you know? So fortunately, I got to keep Temple for myself because that was my name anyway, you know, so it worked out. Get the cushiony stuff. I'm afraid you're going to bust your head open on the cement here. There you go. Stuck on my shoe. Do whatever needs to happen.
Now, Tattoo City, did you travel a lot? Like, I know you went to Hank's. You spent a lot of time at Hank's.
You know, that's when kind of like, it wasn't like he was cracking a whip or anything, but I just felt the responsibility, you know, to stay, because I was like, you know, like technically the manager, but that didn't really mean, that meant, you know, I sent stuff to him and stuff, you know.
You were trying to mail and shit to him.
You know, so basically, you know, I knew he depended on us. He was out of town a lot. He was running around, started doing more books and stuff, you know. So I felt, you know, like the responsibility to stay. You know, we got to go to New York a couple times, hit some conventions. And I did get to go to Amsterdam a couple times, you know, but the first time I went to Amsterdam was basically just to go to a tattoo convention with him. It was my first tattoo convention. I had never tattooed, like, in public, and I was tattooing with Ed and Zeke.
Oh, awesome.
So I was
absolutely.
like this.
Sweaty.
Exactly. You know, and I mean, I really didn't even know who Zeke Owens was until I met him and started hearing, you know, oh shit, Zeke Owens, blah, 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 this and that, you know, and it was like, wow. In retrospect, you know, once I left Amsterdam, I was like, oh my God, I'm almost glad I didn't realize, you know. It would have made it even, like, all the more difficult, you know. But it was great. It was great. They were both awesome and supportive, and, you know, it's like anything. Is if you're not, you know, pretentious, then they're totally down to help you with whatever you need,
right?
You know, so It was really great.
And after Tattoo City, When did you end up leaving Tattoo City?
I ended up leaving Tattoo City in '96. I was over in Amsterdam, and crazy shit went down. I was fucking around with drugs, and I bummed Ed out. And he basically canned me when I got home.
Right.
So I worked a little bit at Primal Urge, and I worked a little bit at American Graffiti for You.
Right.
While I was trying to get Temple open.
Right.
And, you know, it was weird because I figured Ed had paved this new way for tattooers, you know. Like, I thought it was going to be no problem. Like, getting a shop, I had good numbers and great references. And, you know, I was just going to come to Oakland and open up shop, you know.
Right.
And it took me, like, over a year. So I ended up going back to Amsterdam and saving money through the winter. And I even went and worked with Dandelion and Howie in Philly and Dave Gibson down in San Diego. I just kind of did all the traveling I always wanted to do because I wasn't tied down to a job.
Sure.
So I ran around for about a year and a half, and then in '98 opened up Temple Tattoo.
And now the Temple, now you have their second shop, Tattoo 13.
Mm-hmm.
And how did that one come about?
You know, I've had 13 almost as long as Temple. A lot of people don't realize that because I don't really talk about it very much. But basically, it came about, it was kind of a strategy move. You know, that's really the neighborhood that I wanted to be in when I first got here, but nobody was having a tattoo shop up there. And it was even quite more ghetto than it is today, you know.
Right. Oh, for sure.
But it was just kind of weird, you know. It was like there weren't the right spaces, and I got in really good with the people that I was with downtown. And Ernie Gosnell, who I love dearly, was thinking about moving to Oakland. And, you know, he respectfully came in and said, hey, I'm thinking about moving to Oakland. I just want you to know because we're good friends, and, you know, I'll make sure and not be close and all this stuff. But I know Ernie, and I know that he would open up something fucking cool, you know. So I was like, well, you know, East Oakland's killer, you know, because I know he loves the hood too,
right.
You know, and I do too, but he loves it even more, you know. And he was like, you know, I like East Oakland and everything, but I think up in the 40s on Telegraph is where I'd open. And I was just like, God damn, that's where I wanted to open. You know, he's going to kill it up there, you know. So what I did is when he went back home, I went and rented a spot exactly where he was talking about. And I figured he could either work with me or we'd be friendly neighbors.
Right.
But I didn't want... I was cutting my slice of pie out of Oakland.
State the flag, right.
Yeah, I was just like, you know, if he's going to go up there, I need to get up there now. So it's not like I'm copying him. You know what I mean? Because I totally wanted to be up there a year before. And, here you go, Pumpkin. So it was kind of, you know, like a strategic move. And he loved the shit out of it. He thought it was the coolest thing in the world because he came back and I was like, I got a spot, you know. And, you know, and he was like, I'm not even going to come down, you know. And he had changed his mind. I think he just had a girlfriend down here, you know. And he had some health stuff going on. And he's got a really good thing going on up there. So he just stayed up there, you know. So I was really glad that it was kind of like what, you know, inspired me to do it a little sooner than I actually would have. Right. And I've always been really glad that I never listened to anybody and did it anyway.
Exactly.
Because it's a real nice neighborhood now, you know, and I live like, you know, it's totally 5 blocks down the street, and, you know, it's just super up and coming, and I've always loved the vibe of it. It's kind of where the alternative kids lived before. It was called Temescal. It was just the 40s, you know,
And how has it changed? How's your life changed from being like? Because I've always known you as just being like one of the bros. Like you've always in my life personally treated me as like your friend. Even when I totally looked up to you and stuff like that, I've always watched you treat people like in a genuine, friendly manner. To like having to like be the boss.
Well, it's because
now you're the boss of.
That's why I've always treated you like a friend. Because I always, you know, thought you were friend worthy.
And so now you're the boss. How do you juggle this? And now, as this is a sort of faceted question, now you're a father, and this is
and now you're a boss and a father.
I'm a boss and a father too, and I've had this conversation with several friends who are now have evolved their lives, have gotten into being a father now, which is a very drastic change.
Yeah. From
the pirate's life to the. You know, you're grounded into this thing of fatherhood. How has this like really affected your life?
It's affected it in a really great way. You know, I always, to be honest, like having a child was one of the most terrifying things that could possibly have happened to me, you know, because especially, you know, after owning 2 tattoo shops for maybe just like 3 to 5 years, each one of them, you know, like having a kid would have just been like a wrench in an engine, you know. But I'm really grateful and feel really blessed that it didn't happen until now. You know, it was just like so unexpected. You know, I always thought I was going to have kids just because I like kids, so I always figured I'd have kids. And then I didn't, and I was traveling around and living a bit of a renegade lifestyle. So, you know, by the time I started hitting 35, 36, I was like, you know, I'm kind of cool. I'm kind of digging not having kids, you know?
Right.
And my wife wanted to have kids, you know, and I was always like, well, if it's meant to be, it'll happen, you know. And I think once she got used to the fact that we weren't going to have kids is when we got pregnant, you know what I mean? Which was like, you know, about 1.5 years ago or so, you know.
Awesome.
So it's been wonderful. I mean, it's the coolest thing in the world. It's like the hardest job you love doing the most. You know what I mean? It's like, it makes everything a little bit more difficult and everything a little bit more wonderful too.
Right.
You know.
The importance. I think that for me, it's taught me what is actually really important and what things aren't important. What things I thought
100%.
were so important before have just fallen by the wayside and mean absolutely nothing to me.
Yeah.
And I think it's really gave me an ability to enjoy the time I spend tattooing more. Is that affect you?
You know, I'll expand on that. I totally agree. And one thing that that it's done for me, which it's really surprised me, is I've always been somewhat of a little. I can get kind of frazzled at times. You know, I'm a pretty high energy person, and the shop can be like really busy, and there can be like a lot of attention extortionists, or just people asking questions, or whatever it is. You know, and you know, so it's like you can get like kind of wound out real easy. I mean, you know, it's like tattooing. You know, you're putting shit in people's skin forever. You got to act like you're paying attention. You really need to most of the time. Plus, you're doing all this other stuff.
Right.
And that kind of would frazzle me a little bit, you know, I'd need to like kind of get off and smoke pot and just be wound up for hours. And I always thought a kid would do that to me even more, but he's actually made me feel a lot more grounded in life. You know, like I feel way more centered, like way more like I know what's going on and I have everything not everything under control, you know, but like I have way more things under control than I did before I had him because of the perspective aspect.
Right.
You know, like I'll come home and put him, hopefully if I can get home and put him down, you know, I'm sitting in a rocking chair for like an hour, and I just love it. And I never have done that before. You know, just sit with your kid in the rocking chair and listen to the wave machine, you know. And
the white noise. God bless the white noise.
The rainforest. Yeah, you know, it's just awesome. And he makes me happy, and I dig it. And it's like, you do appreciate tattooing more. I find that my tattoos are getting better, because I'm like way more focused, you know. I'm kind of like learning to cut the bullshit, you know, because I don't got time for it, you know. So it's like more of a quality day, you know. So I really enjoy it. I want to move something really quick because I'm afraid he's gonna bump his head on the cement here. Muggsy, hop up, Muggs. Come on, I don't mean to push you off. Let's do this. This is better. There you go. All right. That way if I sit you up, you can fall backwards, you know, crack your head open. There you go. Okay. What, that's not good? What?
Dude, danger is the best part.
Sit with me for a minute.
Yeah, we're pretty much almost done here. I'm out of my written questions here. Where do you see... I've been asking most everybody this similar question, like, with this mass media sort of explosion of tattooing, I personally have had very strong opinions about it from the beginning. I have voiced them and not voiced them. How do you think this is going to pan out? Because I know a lot of people are all sitting around going like, I don't know, man. I don't know. How do you think it's going to go? How do you hope it's going to go?
How do I hope?
Yes.
Well, that's easy. You know, you probably remember me saying when we worked together that I wish tattooing became illegal.
Yes. I
Because,
feel the same way.
yeah, if it became illegal, I feel like, you know, all this bullshit would just fall to the wayside. All these, you know, tattooodles websites and, you know, fucking television shows and all this bullshit would just fall to the wayside, and people that are truly into tattooing would just go underground, you know, and people could still get tattooed.
Right.
That's not going to happen. What's weird about it, you come back up here? What's weird about it is that, you know, I thought when like in the early 90s, you remember, when tattooing kind of started exploding,
Right.
you know, I figured like this is something that, I'm like, wow, this might last like 20 years or something. You know, I thought we're going to ride this like 20-year, because I had heard or learned that it had gone through waves of popularity
Right.
before and being fashionable and stuff. You know, in the 60s it was for a minute, so then in the 80s it came around with the punk rock thing again, and you know, and then the 90s, like, quote-unquote, normal people started getting tattooed,
Right.
you know? And I think Ed had a lot to do with that.
Sure.
And I also find it interesting that, I'll just say this as a side note, I find it interesting that the person that brought tattooing to the masses and to the foreground of the mainstream is the same person who's completely driving it into the ground.
No, it's not necessarily him.
No.
It's not him.
No, it's the
not
name.
him. It's
yeah,
the,
it's the name.
it's the, yeah. It's his name. It's not him.
It's his ex-partner.
Right.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I don't mean that to be I'll say also that I'm really glad that Ed Hardy was the one who actually got that gig.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
if
like,
anybody should have, he
deserved
should have got it.
I've always said Ed is the man who
Right.
deserves that. So, I mean, I'm stoked for Ed.
Right.
I'm just not stoked that I see tattoo clothes at the flea market. And I heard,
Right.
I heard something
Ed Hardy at the flea
Yeah.
market. You're like, dude, he was the, you know, like.
This is
yeah.
really funny, Scott. You can keep this intercut or do whatever you want. But I have a friend who plays poker for like a living. And he says that one of the strategies is if you see somebody wearing Ed Hardy clothes, you go in and you play hard. Because they're usually not the brightest. It's usually like a bunch of like wannabe gangsters in there like throwing money around,
Right, sure,
you
yeah.
know? And then the funny part is that there'll even be people that flip it, that will intentionally wear the Ed Hardy clothes so people think they don't play that well. And then they'll flip it back on the
dude.
person, you know?
Poker, the
Pretty
world
crazy.
of poker.
Yeah. But, you know, how I hope it all works out is I just want people like you and me that love tattooing. I want people that aren't tattooers that love tattooing to just be like proud of their tattoos and to be happy with what they're doing. You know, there's always going to be people that start tattooing. Like I always thought Nick Roden was a great example
Right.
of newcomers that deserve it just as much as us or people
Right.
before us.
Sure.
You know, I wouldn't want to start tattooing now. I
No.
can't imagine what it would be
Absolutely
like,
not.
you know. But, you know, I was looking at a magazine the other day, and I saw, like, a shop where I used to work in Japan, and the chick who was the helper is tattooing now for, like, 4 years, you know. And I've seen, you know, piercers become tattooers and open up tattoo shops and, you know, and even buy laser machines and start removing tattoos out of their tattoo shops. You know, I mean, it's like full gamut, you know,
Right.
like the whole 9 yards. So I just want my shop to stay the same way that it is.
Right.
You know, I love Blackheart. I love Theo Mendel's place. You know, 222 was amazing. You know, I just want the integrity of tattooing to remain. And I
Right.
think that as long as there's people with integrity doing it, that will happen. You know, and my goal basically is for Temple Tattoo to be an institution of good tattooing.
Right.
You know, so whether I'm there or Jason's there or whoever works there, just make sure that they're like a good tattooer. They're going to be cool to the people that come in. People are going to have a positive experience and leave happy.
Right.
That's how I want it to go.
Like chummy.
Yeah, totally,
Chummy,
man.
chummy,
Perfect
perfect.
example.
Yes.
You know, this couple came in yesterday, and we all had appointments through the day. And they just wanted, you know, they were like, you know, in their 50s, and they were getting their first tattoos, and it was just like their initials, or the husband was an artist, and he drew them kind of like real abstract. And, you know, I love doing tattoos like that. They were just so stoked. They were so stoked that they didn't have to wait, and that we made it happen for them before the day started, and they loved the shop, and they just, you know, they're as happy as somebody walking out with a back piece.
Right.
You
Sure.
know what I mean? And it's like a little bit more instant gratification because it's a little
Right.
quicker, and, you know.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, is there anything else you want to add or subtract or?
I think I would like to say how much I appreciate my crew. and give a big shout out for Oakland.
Oakland.